What's up, everybody? It's your boys Tommaso
and Alessandro,
and we're back with another sample breakdown. Today we're showing you a sample titled Shakedown, and it's from our New York Minute Sample Pack Volume 4. The New York Minute series is a mix of contemporary as well as classic 90s inspired New York samples. Sometimes it's jazzy and with real instruments and a real organic vibe, and sometimes it's rather synth heavy because there's a lot of different stuff that was flipped into classic New York records. So like I said, this sample pack series is kind of an homage to that type of sound. So without further ado, let's get to it. The idea was to come up with a cool riff and then compose the rest of the music around that riff. And I think the sample is in F sharp minor. So that was the riff that I came up with. The first sound that I started off with was this DX7 80s digital synth, which sounds like this. In terms of editing, there's a little bit happening here. There's a doubler to give me a little bit more stereo image. And usually I use the basic doubler preset, which is like a mild stereo enhancement that's happening without getting too crazy, you know.
Yeah, what this does, it doubles the signal and pans it. The left and right signal by a couple milliseconds. It creates a stereo separation effect.
Haas effect thing.
Exactly.
So the second thing is these Magma BB tubes, which I like to use a lot, especially on drums, but also just for stereo, like saturation that's happening that I really like because it's subtle. It gives you a nice saturated sound without sounding distorted. So it's really cool to just enhance certain things. Like I said, I like to use it on drums, but also in, I don't know, on synthesizers. And then the dirty filter to roll off some of the bass, so everything below 75 hertz. And a compressor. Probably just thought, let me make this a little louder without turning up the volume. And this is what I did here.
What you end up with.
Yeah. And so that's the first sound. And then there's a bass. Very low, just to double the same thing, which is a mini V preset called A Bass You'll Use. I guess they were right about that. Just plays the same thing, no editing on there. Eventually you have to bring up some chords to fatten the thing up. And this is where this CP70 sound comes in, which is a keyscape patch. Electric Grand CP70, so that's the clean version or the unedited patch. Didn't mess with any of the parameters or knobs here, just kept the preset as it is. And then there's a chorus, which again, something that I apparently like to do, which we found out by doing these sample breakdowns, is just pull up this default setting from the Juno 6 chorus, and that's that. Okay, so you get the same line here, but then it goes into a chord instead of just staying on the bass note. And then for that actual riff, this is the progression that I came up with. This sounded the most New York to me, not too jazzed up.
The reason why I asked him why he came up with these chords is the first note of this run, I guess, is a C sharp, but he plays the F sharp minor, which is the root chord. And with the C sharp, you can play a lot of different chords when this melody run comes in. Like you could also play a C sharp minor, or like a C sharp major dominant 7 even, but you know, he decided to go with this one, and I asked why, and because he said it sounds the most New York and the most confident. Usually when you have like the 5th note of your root chord in the bass, like the C sharp over the F sharp minor in this case, it sounds very dramatic because you already have the dominant key in your bass. After that, this one is, you know, B minor 7. After that, it goes back to the F sharp minor 7, and it's very basic but very, very effective. It's pretty cool. You know, some samples we completely do them on our own. So this one, he did it completely on his own. I haven't like added any instruments to it or anything. So when we do these breakdowns, for me, it's the first time I actually go in depth on a project.
Yeah, these are the 3 sounds we got so far. Obviously, it's boring to just keep it this way and then nothing is happening. So I came up with a synth line, and I actually played this on the Behringer Poly D there's a little bit of editing going on. So let me play you the sound without editing. The cool thing about the sound is there's a little bit of a modulation that happens at the attack of the sound. Almost like it's stuttering in a way. Gives the sound a cool character. So the first thing we edit here to make it sound even cooler is the ref plate reverb. I used the EMT preset and 25% mix blended in. And I used the stock flanger from Cubase with a mix of 30%. Then the Valhalla delay. This is like a 1/8 delay. It's a single delay mixed in with 30%. A rather long feedback and a low cut at around 1000 hertz and a high cut at around 10,000.
Yeah,
and the delay is what gives it a lot of the vibe.
Yeah, this makes the sound come alive.
Then the next plugin is a dirty filter, and we cut everything below 210 hertz and cut everything above 10K. I end up doing this a lot with sounds from the synth, because with all types of real instruments and synthesizers, usually they sound a little fatter in the low end. If you leave that in every single sound, then it just adds up to being too much. So you want to be strategic about when you leave it in and when you actually want to cut it in order to make space for other elements that might need this particular frequency band more. And then lastly, the chorus, again,
The default.
just load it up, default 50%, and it'll sound cool. This is the sound that we came up with. And then if you play that over the chords, okay. So what I noticed then is, and this is often a thing that I do or that I notice, and with the bass sound, you hear like the attack, the boom, and then there's a modulation that takes out some of the high end, and then it stays there, but it's less audible than the initial hit. And in order to compensate for that, instead of adding another synthesizer, is playing the root notes on the piano, because the piano, like all other real instruments, has the tendency to fill up the space quite nicely within a track, within a mix, in a way that the VSTs usually can't.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did here. There's a lot going on here compared with to like no editing. I mean, there's also a pitch, even transposed, yeah. And then there's also a guitar, which also does the same thing. This is like very saturated. This is like a fuzzy type of
guitar,
sound. Yeah. Let's see what preset I used here. This is Amplitude 5, by the way. Boosted Crunch is the title of the preset that I used. And all those layers combined, then you get like a heavy sound that sets the mood.
One sound doesn't do everything. It's a layer of multiple sounds.
Yeah. And then the combination of those sounds is what gives you the perception of, oh, this sounds fat.
If you layer sounds a lot, it allows you to like use that as a way to keep the arrangement more interesting. You can leave it like that for the first 8 bars, and then you drop one of them for the pre-chorus, and you leave it like that for 8 bars. And then in the chorus, you bring that sound back and add another one on top. But they all play the same thing. And you can make the arrangement interesting just using a couple musical ideas. Also, that way you leave more space for the artist if you're working on a beat.
So now that we got that going into the composition, I came up with this sound, which plays over the signature riff. Which is, obviously Just Blaze inspired. I actually did this with the synth as well. And I just put the glide to max. It does like a bend from the lower octave F sharp up. So this is without effects. And then reverb, Valhalla delay, a filter. Filter is just from the preset. I didn't even use this one. And the BX Solo, I think it's a free plugin too. It's like a stereo imager. And what I usually use this for is either to make a sound mono or to give me a little bit of stereo width. This just enhances everything a little bit. It's set to 150%.
This plugin is also cool for mixing purposes. You can solo the mono signal, and you can also solo the side signal or just the left and right. Pretty cool for like referencing if you want to compare your side signal, for example, to another track's side signal.
So this is what we got so far. One thing I didn't mention is this over here. So this is an effect from Analog Lab. This is what it sounds without editing. And this is what it sounds like with editing. And again, the delay is what brings it to life and gives it a signature texture, I guess. So then there's really just a few little fills and layers. Like the musical idea is here. So the first thing I added was this quick ARP. And this is transposed down. I originally played it in this register. And this is like a very 8-bit-ish kind of sound. I also played this with the synthesizer. And then, again, dry with effects. And this is actually a preset that I use very often. And this is the Synths ARP delays. So whenever I play a sound like that, 9 times out of 10 I use this preset, which is really just ref plate, a little bit of reverb. And that's usually the setting that I tweak the most, depending on how much reverb I want. The flanger, the Valhalla delay, the feedback is turned to 100%, which is quite a bit, which gives you a long delay tail. It fills up the space in your track without grabbing too much attention, really.
Yeah.
And it's funny because at this point, when I added this sound, I was like, woo! When I made this, you know? And I thought, let me add like a woo to the track, because why the hell not, you know? And so this is from the Azure Dreams Volume 1 vocal library that we put out with our homie Maola. Shout out to him. And let me see. So this elastic pitch, which pitches it up 4 semitones in order to match the key of the track. Then dirty filter to get rid of a lot of the high end. It's a vocal, but it's supposed to be a background texture. So if there's actual vocals on top of this, you need to make space for that. And so there's a lot of the bass cut out. So technically the only thing audible here is between 600 and 1000 hertz. And if you play it, you can see that. So this is the part that you're hearing.
Yeah.
Little bit of compression, Valhalla vintage verb, and the delay. And then for, let's call it the chorus, there's really nothing else happening instead of an additional guitar layer and an additional CP70 layer and an additional pluck layer. But I literally just copied those. So this is the original plug. And then I copied that, and did I transpose it here? No, I transposed it here. See, this says 2 up, and this is 14 up. So it's just a little tip for you sound designers out there and producers out there. When you transpose things up and down, usually that introduces artifacts, which can sound weird, but they can also sound very cool. However, you can only get those if you're transposing audio files. It just gives you a texture that you can't get anywhere else. So it's definitely worth to look into these things. So this is the original CP70. And then
It's just an octave. Yeah.
just an octave higher. Let me check. That sounds like a... Oh, see, it's actually a different patch. So this is a contact library. It's called the Canterbury Suitcase. And this is like a Rhodes electric piano library. Actually very cool. I have not heard anybody else talk about this before. Most of the time I use this in samples, but it sounds a little dirtier and it has a little bit more texture than a Keyscape, for example, which sounds really clean. In this case, it's just a background patch, really an octave higher, to give me a little bit more shine in the upper range. And then lastly, there's one layer of the guitar. Also, just an octave up. Let me see if I actually use the same amp and everything. No, this is a a different preset. It's called Crunchy Rhythm. Because I'm not a guitarist, it's not like I know all these amps and know which amp to use for what sound. So I usually go by sound character. It's a good description of what you're looking for. And then I just step through the presets until I find a sound that does what it's supposed to do. And those both together, I know one is panned to the left, one is panned to the right. Just to fatten that up a little bit. And lastly, and I already mentioned this quick arp is up an octave, and also the vocal fill is also up an octave. And that's basically all the elements. So at this point, you know, we like to flip our samples, usually just to give them a test drive, see how they feel, see if anything's lacking. Sometimes turns out very cool, and I actually made this just for demonstration purposes, so I made this like an hour ago, but we'll definitely finish this joint because it came out super cool. I pitched it up 1 semitone and I sped it up 3 BPM and added some drums from our Premium Bounce Volume 3 drum kit and added an 808, which is Sublab, the Narcos preset. That's all that does, really. And that's what I came up with. And lastly, because it's New York, and I hope YouTube doesn't take our shit down because of it, I added some Jadakiss to it, which, you know, for New York hip-hop can't really go wrong.
It couldn't be sweeter. Life's a bitch, depending on how you treat her. You might get rich, it's guaranteed you gon' die. You might get missed for maybe 2 or 3 hours till they light they spliffs. You tell me I'm the best, it's a compliment.
Yeah. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this sample breakdown and learned something new that you can use in your production. As always, if you're into those types of sounds, make sure you check out the New York Minute Sample Pack Volume 4. And as you can tell, because it's Volume 4, there's also Volume 1, 2, and 3. So make sure you check that out as well if you're into those East Coast sounds. This particular beat is not online at this point, but we'll definitely finish it and upload it within the next few weeks, I'd say. So if you're a rapper and you like this particular joint, give us some time, be patient, it's coming, 100%. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure you keep the likes and the comments and all the good stuff coming, as we will continue to keep those sample breakdowns coming. Thanks for watching. Peace.
Peace.